President Biden says he signed 300 bipartisan bills into law. At least 23 million people affected by earthquake. Assad forces bomb areas hit by earthquake hours after disaster. Women wearing headscarves beaten by French police. Balloon is ours, says China, after U.S. declares no return. Catholic Church unveils Black Mary and Jesus posters. From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight. Despite partisan hostility in Washington, President Joe Biden emphasized bipartisanship during his second State of Union address on Tuesday. He said that includes reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, and the Respect for Marriage Act. He stressed if we could work together in the last Congress, there is no reason we cannot work together in this new Congress. However, Biden was repeatedly jeered and booed while delivering his speech. Partisanship is also widening as the Judiciary Committee, led by GOP firebrand Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, hosted a combative hearing. It focused on an alleged co-relationship between immigration and fentanyl trafficking and accused the Biden administration of purposely dismantling border security. U.S. President Joe Biden reportedly has invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi, or otherwise known as the Butcher of Gujarat, for a state visit this summer. The Press Trust of India reports Modi's office has accepted the invitation in principle. The White House's invitation comes at a time when India has assumed the presidency of the Group of 20, or G20 nations. Sources, on condition of anonymity, told PTI that the state visit is expected to last a few days. It could include an address to the joint session of the U.S. Congress by Modi and a state dinner at the White House. Officials from both sides are looking for appropriate dates in June and July when the U.S. House and Senate are in session. The death toll from Monday's earthquake has surpassed 11,000 people in southern Turkey and war-ravaged northern Syria. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited the areas near the epicenter in his country on Wednesday. The quake has affected the ability of aid organizations to operate in Turkey. The only crossing between Syria and Turkey approved by the United Nations for transporting international aid no longer is functioning. UN officials say this complicates an already fraught response to the unfolding humanitarian crisis. Rescuers raced against time early Thursday to pull survivors from the rubble before they succumb to cold weather. Joining us from Istanbul is TV presenter and senior producer at Türkiye International TV channel, TRT World, Sumeyye Ceylan. Thank you so much, Sumeyye, for joining us. Please tell us, what is the current situation of rescue and relief operations in Türkiye?
While rescue operations continue across the quake-hit areas in Türkiye, of course, every hour the chance of finding people alive is quite low. But there were so many miracles 40, 50 hours after the earthquake struck Türkiye and the region. Survivors are obviously in shock. Many of you can guess that they are traumatized. Their families are waiting outside the rubbles or around the rubbles, near the rubbles, in desperation. And they're either crying of happiness if they find their loved ones alive, and if not, of sorrow, unfortunately. I can say there's been a localized response. So government officials, police, military, local NGOs, and volunteers are doing everything they can. The international community is now arriving too. There is aid from dozens of countries. I was at a local aid coordination center in Istanbul earlier. The spirit there was just indescribable. Everyone, regardless of their age, but mostly young people, and actually many of them were young people, including children, are helping with the distribution of that aid. There are boots, sweaters, blankets, food, everything that will help the survivors. President Erdogan told reporters that the official death toll had climbed to 9,057 during a visit to Hatay, which was one of the region's hardest hit by the earthquake. And unfortunately, that number is expected to rise in the coming days. Now, we have to remember it's the worst disaster this country has seen in over a century, and recovery will not be easy. But the people of Türkiye, they're strong and resilient. So the next days will be more of a recovery period, which is expected to take years.
Thank you so much, Sumeyye, for your response and those updates. Middle East Eye reports that artillery struck the northwestern Syrian town of Maria less than 2 hours after Monday's devastating quake. Syrian government forces hit areas badly affected by the quake shortly after the disaster, according to Syrian and British sources. British MP Alicia Kearns, who chairs the Foreign Affairs Committee, said Tuesday President Bashar al-Assad launched a truly callous and heinous attack. A military source stationed near the location confirmed the incident, saying there were no material or human losses. The earthquake has so far resulted in the deaths of more than 11,000 people across Turkey and Syria, as we just heard from Sumeyye. Mamoun al-Khatib, an activist based in Maria, told Middle East Eye 4 or 5 shells had struck the area. Syrian military tanks and vehicles were also spotted heading towards Suwaida province in southern Syria on Monday morning. British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly described the attack as completely unacceptable. French magazine Charlie Hebdo has sparked outrage by publishing a cartoon mocking Turkey after it was hit by 2 deadly earthquakes on Monday. The cartoon shared on Twitter showed collapsed and damaged buildings, a reversed car, and hills of debris. Earthquake in Turkey was written on the top right corner of the cartoon. The bottom read, "Didn't even need to send tanks." Internet users reacted to the drawing, expressing their frustration and anger. Charlie Hebdo is a French satirical magazine infamous for its cartoons insulting Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. 2 young women who were beaten by French police near Paris were placed into custody on Tuesday. University students Miriam, 24, and Mariam, 25, was assaulted on the streets by officers in Arsène-sous-Seine city on April 14, 2022. They were summoned by the court Tuesday. They told Anadolu Agency their version of the incident. Miriam told police officers who were speeding near the crosswalk under the Cliché Bridge were about to hit both women. She said the officers were speeding although the green light for the pedestrians was showing. She said the officers called out to them. Then one got out of the car and held the women's arms and started to beat her in the face, taking out all his rage. She began to shout and witnesses came to intervene. Miriam and Mariam took refuge in a mosque, afraid the policemen would follow. The 2 women filed a complaint in May, but it was dismissed in September. China says balloon is ours. Details of the story after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. China on Tuesday doubled down on its claim to a downed balloon after Washington expressed no intention to return the alleged spy device. Mao Ning, spokeswoman for China's foreign ministry, admitted the balloon belongs to China. Niang was responding to a question about U.S. having no plans to return the debris from the shot-down balloon. Ning called the U.S. use of force an overreaction and insisted the balloon was for civilian use, according to the Chinese daily Global Times. She added the Chinese government will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights. Beijing's comments came after U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said there was no intention to return the pieces back. Washington is recovering the debris from the Atlantic Ocean for analysis by intelligence experts. The U.S. shot down the suspected spy balloon on Saturday after it was spotted over U.S. airspace off the coast of South Carolina. China has accused Washington of damaging progress made in bilateral relations by the action. The Chinese government is keeping close tabs on Uyghurs abroad and encouraging those in Turkey to spy on one another. The family moved to Istanbul in 2016. Police in East Turkestan, which the Chinese government calls Xinjiang, tried to send him messages. They wanted to know about the clientele at his modest barbershop in a district that is home to a large Uyghur immigrant population. Police sent Yasin Can threats through his relatives. They imprisoned his father-in-law, and in January, police sent Yasin Can a customer, a young Uyghur man who was an indiscreet spy. The man recorded Yasin Can and customers in the shop and took photos of the storefront. A police officer in Hotan in East Turkestan had asked the man to survey Yasin Can and other Uyghurs in Istanbul. Roughly 50,000 Uyghurs in Turkey face unique risks. Turkey is now home to the largest Uyghur immigrant population outside Central Asia. The family of a man shot dead hours after giving a speech to demonstrators during last year's nationwide protests in Kazakhstan is fighting to clear his name. Prosecutors charged Farkhat Umarov after his death with taking part in mass riots, assaulting police officers, and unlawfully entering a police station. A court in the southern city of Kizilorda recently ruled that there were serious violations of law during the probe and ordered further investigation. Umarov's brother Maqsad said the family believes he was the victim of an assault. They accused police of faking evidence to incriminate him and are urging authorities to drop the charges and open a criminal probe. In January 2022, a rally against a fuel price hike in the western town of Zanazoan spread throughout Kazakhstan. Umarov joined anti-government protests and spoke to protesters about the plight of common people in the oil-rich country. He called for rooting out widespread corruption and was shot dead hours later near the city's police headquarters. Israeli forces killed at least 5 Palestinians on Monday during a raid on a refugee camp in occupied West Bank. Jericho Governor Jihad Abul Asal said the Israelis killed the 5 during an incursion into the Akbat Jabr refugee camp near the city. Eyewitnesses told Anadolu agency a fire exchange took place between Palestinians and Israeli forces in the camp. They added at least 3 Palestinians from the camp were detained by Israeli forces during the incursion. Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh mourned the death, stressing Palestinians will continue to resist the Israeli occupation. The Catholic Church in the UK has unveiled posters depicting Mary and Jesus, known as Maryam and Prophet Isa, to Muslims, peace be upon them both, as different ethnicities. It is part of an anti-racism drive launched in the wake of George Floyd's killing in Minnesota in May 2020. Floyd's murder by a white police officer launched historic protests against police brutality in the US and abroad. The images showing Mary and Jesus as Black, Asian, and Middle Eastern reflect the rich diversity of the church community, according to the church. Prophet Isa was also born in the Middle East and was not historically white-skinned. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales released the artwork as part of Racial Justice Sunday, launched after Floyd's death. Meanwhile, in January, the Church of England apologized for its shaming links to the transatlantic trafficking and enslavement of African people. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we will be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Let's take a look at our in-depth analysis segment.
Republican Governor DeSantis of Florida is fighting history. People who fight history become history themselves. But he seems to be rising. He's rejecting a course, calling it a left-wing ideology, and it's about African American history. Can people eliminate slavery and what happened to African American in America? I don't think so. We have a guest, Dr. Marvin Dunn. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Marvin.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
Dr. Dunn is a former naval officer and professor emeritus of the Department of Psychology at Florida International University. So, Professor Dunn, tell me what Dantes is afraid of.
Oh, the truth. He is afraid of the brutal, bloody, oppressive, racial history of Florida. He is afraid that if these stories become common knowledge in Florida, that it could damage the state's reputation. He's afraid that sooner or later blacks may be coming forward asking for reparations for these events. So the less said about these things, the better as far as the government is concerned. So Florida is now receding into the 1950s, where even Black history is now up for dispute.
I mean, do Republicans want to write history about blacks?
Does he want to rewrite that history?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Are they funding and commissioning to rewrite the thing?
Well, he wants to deracialize history. For example, if the governor had his way, slavery in Florida would be taught this way. Some Africans came over and worked free for a while, and that was it. No racial reference to enslavement, exploitation, brutalization, sexual abuse. All of that is wiped clean in Florida's record as far as the government is concerned. And we can't talk about those things lest in Florida a teacher could get arrested. For example, right now, if a teacher took a copy of my book, A History of Florida Through Black Eyes, into her classroom, she could be arrested, or he could be arrested and charged with a felony for taking a book into a classroom that was not approved by the media specialist. So now in Florida, teachers are taking out their personal books they brought in and used for years to teach their students, taking them home for fear of being charged with a felony. This is Florida today.
Keeping a book is a felony?
I'm sorry?
Keeping a book is a felony in Florida?
Taking the book into a school is a felony unless that book has been approved by the school librarian, who is under the thumb of the school principal, who knows what the state wants and does not want in classrooms. So you think the media specialist or librarian would be open to whatever book a teacher has that she or he wants to use that they've been using for years to teach history? No, that person is going to obey the law, not have literature in her classroom that has not been approved by the state. And that's very, very frightening. This is how Stalin did it. It's how Hitler did it. It's how Castro did it. You eliminate or reduce the amount of information or truth that's available in the society. You capture the children in your own educational system and brainwash them into believing your own beliefs. And liberals, intellectuals become the enemy. The college professionals in this state are now under threat. The governor wants to take away tenure, for example. The professors can no longer count on being tenured at a university in Florida. That's the backbone of academia that he's breaking. So the level of intrusion into the classroom, into the educational process that this man is perpetrating is unprecedented. Unprecedented.
So, Professor Dunn, don't you think it's unconstitutional?
To what?
To stop bringing a book and teaching a class and a course teaching about the history of our nation?
That is an excellent question, because the case that I'm involved in, which is challenging the governor in the Woke Act, is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and it will be decided there. That court will decide whether a politician can tell a university professor what he or she can teach in their classes. That's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, given the constant makeup of the court, I wouldn't want to begin to guess how that could come down.
Well, you started a tour about Taste the Truth. Do you think a tour will compensate for what people will miss in the classroom?
Well, no, because I could only at best take a few hundred students on a tour of Florida's racial history to some of the places where the worst things have happened. But they bring their cameras, and they have their TikTok accounts and their Instagram accounts. And when they go places, when we went on that tour a couple of weeks ago, they were sending pictures all over the world. That's how the stories get passed down to this current generation. They don't need to go to a classroom to understand what happened in Rosewood. Go on and go Google it. That's I'm so glad you mentioned this, because you can no longer contain education by saying what goes on in the classroom is what you'll learn, because now with the internet and access to information, you can't restrain learning anymore. You can insert politics to try to control the people who are responsible for teaching or administering schools, but you can't contain information anymore, not in this day and age.
So, Professor Dunn, share with us what this tour Teach the Truth does, and how many places does it take, and what people eventually learn.
Well, we've only done one so far. We will be doing others. We did one in January, earlier this month, and that tour went to 3 places. It went to Mims, Florida, where in 1951, Harry T. Moore and his wife, he was a civil rights leader, was killed when a bomb went off set by the Klan beneath their home. He was the most courageous person who ever walked in Florida, Harry T. Moore. There's a museum there now named for him and his wife. We also took the kids to Newberry, Florida, which is in central Florida. The largest lynching that we know of in Florida history took place in Newberry in 1916, when they lynched about 8 people at one time. So we took the tour to the cemetery where most of these victims are buried. We told their stories. We met with a local historian who knows the story much better than I. And then we took them to Rosewood. Now, all of this is paid for by our nonprofit, the Miami Center for Racial Justice, paid all the expenses for this tour. And the tour consisted of high school students, and they had to bring a parent or a grandparent with them, because we wanted these lessons to be passed down intergenerationally. So we then went to Rosewood. That's Saturday night. And the next morning, Sunday, the bus took the students out to my property in Rosewood for the celebration, but recognition, not celebration, of the 100 years since the massacre took place in 1923. And there were hundreds of people out there who came out for that event.
Are you finding people of different ethnicity participate in this tour?
It's required that the participants be diverse. I wouldn't want to just take black kids up there or white kids. We need to have these experiences shared across ethnic and racial groups. So the work that I'm doing in these tours will always involve a diverse group of students to make the tour. And we'll be doing another one probably in February to other sites that have seen bloody racial violence. And we may also end up in Tallahassee at the Capitol, at the governor's house.
I read somewhere that this teaching AP course on African American history actually is a requirement in Florida. Is that true?
Yes, it is a requirement, but the way that the law is structured, you can't teach anything in history that might make the students feel uncomfortable. How do you teach about slavery or the Holocaust and have students not, I hope they feel uncomfortable. I'd be very concerned if they were very comfortable listening to babies being burned in ovens or being snatched away from their mothers and sold off in slavery. So what DeSantis is saying is you can teach the facts, but you can't express feelings. You can't tell the students what your feelings are, your impressions are about these events, about slavery, about the Holocaust, about the taking of lands from the Native Americans. A teacher can't tell the students what you think, what you feel, your impression. Right, I'm old enough to tell you that I sat on the back of the bus as a child. That hurt. I can't tell my students that experience happened to me. So we're talking about the sterilization of American history, of Black history in particular, in Florida. And if DeSantis becomes president, the same thing's going to happen across the country.
Well, we have Black History Month coming up, and we will be focusing especially so people who are listening, people who are watching outside the classroom, take the message to their classroom. I don't think any DeSantis can desanitize the history. This is going to be there. Thank you so much, Professor Dunn.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.